Chapter 1. I am a whole child. Are you familiar with the term autism? That question from Bryce's early childhood special education teacher marked the first time I heard the word autism applied to my child. For me, as for many parents, it was a scary moment, because that one word scrambled my image of my child's future and tossed it into unsurveyed terrain. Perhaps the most penetrating dread known to humans is fear of the unknown, a fear so fearsome it eludes a phobia designation. But in that first daunting moment, the October sun pierced the wall of windows behind me and settled like a reassuring hand on my back. Against the dark monolith of all I didn't know about autism, one luminous thing I did know shone through. My son was the same child I had fallen in love with the day I learned he was on the way, and I was the same mother he loved and trusted. Autism couldn't dent that. I would never allow his autism to be an excuse for, or to take credit for, the facets of his being that made him whole and unique. I had a child with autism, not an autistic child. I would never put the adjective before the child. No fan am I of gratuitous political correctness. That is not how I see child with autism versus autistic. I see it as an honest confrontation of how words can be accurate and yet set up expectations or preconceived notions that seriously impede progress toward attainable long-range goals. Parents and professionals within the autism community understand that when we use the word autistic, we mean of or relating to autism or a person with autism. But those of us who live with and love a child with autism also live with the vexing lack of knowledge and unfair stereotypes assigned by the larger world. Whether we like it or not, autistic does not yet inspire favorable general reactions, does not yet stir the bystander to look beyond the label to see a whole person, splendidly full of both gifts and gaffes. The broader reaction, silent, withdrawn hand flapper, is too common. The first assumption is one of limitations. Or maybe we get the opposite but equally suffocating notion, awkward, antisocial computer/math/music prodigy. We change perceptions one person at a time. And we begin by asking ourselves, what expectations do words set up? In the early days of my search for information that would give me some grasp of autism, I came across a ridiculous online dictionary that paired the word autistic with the synonym unfit and continued with a jaw-dropping list of 155 related terms, including anesthetized, catatonic, emotionally dead, greedy, heartless, narcissistic, self-besought, soulless, and untouchable. Not one of these words described my child, nor yours, I'll bet. In the long run, and it is a long run, what you choose to believe about a child's autism may be the single biggest factor affecting his ultimate outcome. Consciously or otherwise, you make decisions based on your perspective hundreds of times a day. Losing sight of your whole child behind a label makes your life and his more trying. All children spiral through equilibrium and disequilibrium as they cruise the developmental timeline. Most children will test limits, potty talk in public, elevate stubbornness to Olympic proportions, flush Batman down the toilet, neglect hygiene, and cry when they don't get their way. Attributing it all to autism is not only inaccurate and unfair, it robs you of experiencing the aspects of your child's development that are typical. He has hopes, preferences, likes, dislikes, fears, and dreams like any other child. In time and with teaching, he will be able to tell you about them, albeit maybe not with words. Every child deserves to start his or her life and education with a slate clean of preconceived notions. Even when not malicious, labels are seldom harmless. Consider the varied ways in which putting the adjective before the child colors our expectations and our children's potential. Too low. Bryce is getting A's in my classes, a teacher told me at our first middle school parent conference. He does everything asked of him. His homework is never late. He participates enthusiastically in class, and he is never off task. He continued, Bryce has exceeded everything I thought I knew about how much autistic kids can accomplish. I've had autistic kids in my classes. His creativity and organization are far and above the others. His voice tapered off in mid-sentence. I think I get it, he said. That word, autistic, sets up an expectation that is probably lower than what the child is capable of. Am I getting it? Yes, he got it, and an already good teacher got better for every child with autism who came after Bryce. The teacher realized that when he qualified kid with autistic, he set a bar in his mind for what the child couldn't do. Each person who interacts with the child sets the bar at a different place. Whether too low, you don't think I can do it, why try? Or too high, I'm never good enough, why try? Should we force the child to travel the extra distance to meet what might be our own ill-conceived expectations? The road is long enough as it is. Too high. Autistic today, genius tomorrow. When this bumper sticker loomed up in front of me on the rump of an SUV, it reminded me that messages perpetuating stereotypes, even when well-intended, are dangerous. In reinforcing a lofty, cliched characterization that most individuals with autism will never achieve, autistic today, genius tomorrow, sets up for failure the very people it seeks to support. A middle school administrator once told me how much he enjoyed getting to know Bryce, a child with autism who was neither a genius nor a behavior problem. The fact that a seasoned educator found him remarkable is sad, isn't it? Placing the bar too high, setting up a personal or a societal expectation that any day now our child with autism will wake up as a brainiac, more likely creates a parent who motors along without a realistic grasp of the strengths and weaknesses of his or her own child, and a child who will go through life with feelings of chronic inadequacy. Imagine it. The eyes of impatient society following you, collective fingers drumming, waiting for genius to show itself. Whether the child is struggling or is happily adjusted to who he is, the expectation of breakthrough greatness is bound to be another heavy burden. The mother of a 6-year-old told me that of all the questions she fields about her son's autism, the one that rankles most is, what's his gift? Some children with autism will someday manifest genius. Most will not. Some people without autism emerge as geniuses. Most do not. We owe our children faith, conviction, and support, whether or not they will display genius tomorrow. Genius doesn't guarantee independence, productivity, or satisfaction in life. We know a young man with autism who has indeed grown up to be a math genius. His mother worries because they are a family of math geniuses, chronically unemployed math geniuses. She's seen how genius doesn't translate into ability to interact effectively with coworkers and clients, to accept direction, set goals, meet deadlines. She'd be happier if her son had a little less genius, a lot more social savvy, and some marketable job skills. Too broad. Here's a peek into my professional life as it pertains to this discussion. Editors and instructors constantly pummel writers to avoid adjectives, instead to use stronger, more active, more descriptive nouns, verbs, and phrases. Such words don't always flow from us writers. It often takes effort to pull up those more specific, more emotive terms. But it always makes for more compelling storytelling. Whether or not you're a writer, you become a storyteller on the day your child is born. How you tell your child's story at each step of his development will determine the type of people drawn to him or her. It will influence who commits to playing a role in it for a page, a chapter, or longer, and who tunes out. Looking back at dozens of IEP meetings and teacher conferences over a span of more than 20 years, I can recall very few times when I, or the 75 or so teachers Bryce had, discussed his autism by name. Vivid in my memory are the hundreds of hours and pages of in-depth discussion and strategizing about numerous social, academic, language, and sensory issues. One by one, year by year, we defined, framed, addressed, and vanquished each one in terms of measurable success, largely sans labels. In time and with teaching, Bryce learned to ask for what he needed, based on an understanding of his own learning and processing style. The label applied to that learning and processing style wasn't of primary relevance. Autism offers few shortcuts, few pat answers or glib descriptions for how we represent our child to the world he must inhabit. Through many years of day camps, swim lessons, new teachers, coaches, neighbors, or friends, I never referred to my son as autistic, but rather offered a short list of communication tactics and accommodations that would give him the best shot at success in each environment. I asked people to speak to him directly, at close range and without slang or idioms, to show more than tell, to direct his attention to appropriate peer models. These instructions were simple, but not simplistic. Those concrete directives gave other people in my son's life tools that made his concrete success possible. More recently, a news item caught my eye that illustrated the vastness of the spectrum of abilities within autism. A mom seeking services for her adult son said, "He is almost a savant when it comes to learning facts, but he can't use them." In high school, the young man scored 92% in pure math, but daily problem solving gives him difficulty. This mother said it took 4 years to teach her son to ride the bus alone. In my house, on the other side of the spectrum, Bryce often struggles with retrieving facts, and standardized tests will always be his nemesis. But it took me 1 hour to teach him at 15 to ride the bus alone. Ditto for many other daily life skills he wanted to learn. In general terms, both of these young men could be called autistic. In its least damaging context, the word does little to meaningfully describe the unique challenges and needs each faces. In a more alarming context, the homogeneous thinking it engenders can prevent kids from getting the individualized services they need. Too pervasive. The increase in autism diagnoses and the rigorous efforts of parents, educators, medical professionals, and advocacy organizations have succeeded in raising autism awareness in the general population to unprecedented levels. Now, the widespread use of the term autistic as a blanket adjective has opened the door to its abuse. In 2011, multiple instances surfaced in the Korean media of journalists applying autistic as a pejorative term describing uncooperative or belligerent behavior of adults, particularly politicians. A reader of mine in Europe confirmed that similar usage occurs in her country. Autistic has become a slang word here, and it shows up in a lot of media articles, she said. The headline, Intellectual Autism, was used to criticize a prominent professor's take on economics. Or, autistic sexuality, to signify sex without emotional connection. In the United States, I've heard teenagers sneer, "Are you autistic?" in the context of upbraiding a peer for being momentarily tongue-tied or for refusing to respond to jibes or provocative statements. I resist at every turn the usage of any language that robs our children of their right to be viewed, treated, and educated as individuals with specific needs and strengths. Cultural co-option of autism stereotypes as convenient slurs adds yet another barrier to society's acceptance of our children as whole persons, and another reason to steer our language toward more specific, more edifying representations of our child. Many children with autism will grow into adults who choose to identify themselves as autistic. Many will not ascribe to that label or any other. In all cases, the choice should be theirs alone. Ideally, they will make it based on a childhood that began, as all childhoods should, with a blank slate of possibility. They arrive at adulthood after a moving staircase of years in which adults nurtured their skills and assets, provided education and guidance, both cognitive and social-emotional, taught them informed self-advocacy, and that their autism might be a reason behind some of their challenges, but never an excuse or free pass. So, run the word autistic through your reality checker and ask yourself if it in any way limits your view of what the future holds for your child or student with autism and the value he brings to your world. If it does, remember that nothing is predetermined, and that your time together brims with open-ended opportunity.